Ngozi sat at the long dining table on Thanksgiving evening, surrounded by relatives, friends, and neighbors who had gathered for the celebration. Everyone expected laughter, warm stories, and plates filled with delicious food, but the night took a dark turn when her only son, Chimika, demanded that she sign over her beloved lake house to him. Ngozi's refusal shocked him, and in a sudden burst of anger, he raised his hand and slapped her across the face in front of everyone. The entire room froze, and silence replaced the chatter. Forks and spoons clattered against plates, eyes widened, and guests could hardly believe what they had just witnessed. Some covered their mouths in disbelief, others whispered under their breath, while Ngozi held back tears and quietly left the table. The following days were filled with whispers and gossip. People blamed her for being too stubborn, while others pitied her for enduring such humiliation from the son she had raised with love. Chimika, confident that he would eventually get the house, walked around with pride, certain his mother would bend to his will. He boasted to relatives about how soon he would be the owner of the Grand Lake House, a property admired by everyone who knew its beauty. But Ngozi was silent, calm, and patient. She kept her pain hidden, waiting for the right moment to speak. A few days later, she invited the same family members and friends back, this time to meet her at the very lake house that had caused the storm. Chimika arrived early, smiling and sure that his mother had finally surrendered to his demand. Yet when Ngozi appeared, she was not alone. By her side walked a team of lawyers, holding folders and sealed envelopes. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The guests waited, their hearts racing, while Chimika looked uneasy. Ngozi stood tall, her voice steady, and announced that the lake house was worth millions more than anyone had imagined. Gasps filled the air as the lawyers confirmed every word. But the greatest shock came when she declared that she was not giving the property to her son, or to any relative. Instead, she was transferring it to charity, ensuring it would serve a greater purpose than greed. Chimika's face went pale as whispers turned into applause. His pride crumbled, his arrogance shattered, while Ngozi regained her dignity, proving that strength, wisdom, and love for community were worth far more than selfish demands. Amaka is humiliated by her son Afani when he slaps her in front of everyone. It happened during a family dinner where relatives and neighbors had gathered, and laughter quickly turned into silence. The sound of the slap echoed through the room, and all eyes landed on her. Some guests gasped, others shook their heads, but instead of defending her, the family turned against her. They whispered that she was too stubborn, too difficult, and that she should have simply given Afani what he wanted. Amaka lowered her head, fighting back tears, her heart heavy with pain. The very people she had cared for, cooked for, and supported through the years sat quietly, nodding in agreement with her son, leaving her completely alone. Afani felt victorious. He smirked and carried himself with pride, believing he had finally forced his mother into a corner. He told anyone who would listen that the lake house would soon be his, boasting about how he would renovate it, sell parts of the land, and enjoy the profits. Relatives encouraged him, saying he deserved it, and that his mother was being selfish for holding on to something she could no longer enjoy fully. The betrayal cut deeper than the slap, but Amaka said nothing. She carried her silence like armor, waiting for the right moment. Days passed, and gossip spread throughout the community. Everyone believed Afani had won, while Amaka had been defeated. Yet she stayed calm, her expression unreadable. When the family gathered again at her home, Amaka asked them all to sit down. Afani walked in confidently, certain that this was the day his mother would finally give him the deed to the property. He even laughed with cousins, already making plans in front of her. But Amaka rose slowly and placed a set of documents on the table. The room went still as she revealed that the property he had demanded was not the only one she owned. Hidden away, secured by trusted lawyers, was a second deed to a much larger estate, far more valuable than the lake house. Gasps filled the room, and jaws dropped in disbelief. Afani's face drained of color. He could not speak, his pride crushed in front of the very people who once cheered him on. Amaka looked around calmly, her strength shining through the humiliation she had endured. Without raising her voice, she had turned the tables, proving that patience and wisdom speak louder than arrogance. At a tea dinner, Uzo Amako is slapped by her son Obina over the lake house. The family had gathered for a meal, the table filled with dishes, voices mixing with laughter, when the argument began. Obina grew impatient, demanding that his mother sign the lake house into his name. Uzuomako's refusal angered him so much that he struck her in front of everyone. The room fell silent, plates trembled in people's hands, and the shock on the guests' faces showed how unbelievable the scene was. Uzuomako lowered her eyes, the pain of betrayal heavier than the sting on her cheek. Before anyone could move, her daughter Nina stood up. Her voice shook with emotion, but her courage was clear. She faced Obina without fear, telling him he had crossed a line no child should ever cross. She called out his greed, his disrespect, and reminded everyone present how much their mother had sacrificed for them. The guests looked between the siblings, stunned that while a son could dishonor his mother, a daughter could rise so boldly to defend her. Uzuomako's tears flowed, but this time they were not only of hurt, they carried pride for the daughter who had shown her loyalty. Obina walked away that night, filled with arrogance, believing he would still get his way. He bragged that the lake house was his future, and ignored the words of his sister. Days turned into weeks, and whispers in the community grew. Some pitied Uzuomako, thinking she had lost control of her children. Others assumed Obina had already won. But Uzuomako stayed quiet, holding her secret close to her heart, waiting for the right moment to reveal the truth. When the family gathered again, Uzuomako appeared stronger than ever. She carried a folder in her hands, her children sitting across from her. With a calm voice, she explained that she had made her decision long before that painful night. She announced that all her properties, including the lake house everyone fought over, were not going to Obina. Instead, every single asset would belong to Nina, the daughter who had defended her when she was humiliated. The guests gasped, Obina's jaw dropped, and silence filled the room. Uzuomako looked directly at her son, then turned to Nina with a smile of gratitude. The lake house became more than property that day. It became a symbol of respect, loyalty, and a mother's final decision to reward love over greed. Chidima's son Ikin slaps her during Thanksgiving after she refuses to sign away her property. The celebration that had begun with laughter and cheerful voices suddenly turned into a scene of shock. Plates rattled on the table, cups nearly fell, and every eye in the room widened in disbelief. The sound of the slap echoed, leaving silence heavy in the air. Chidima touched her cheek, her eyes filling with tears, but she did not say a word. The people around her could not believe what they had just seen, yet no one moved to stop him. Ikin stood tall, his chest rising with pride, certain he had finally forced his mother into surrender. Relatives whispered among themselves, some saying she should just give him what he wanted, others shaking their heads but staying quiet. Ikin raised his voice, accusing his mother of being selfish for refusing to hand him the lake house. He believed he had the upper hand, that humiliation would break her spirit and make her sign. Chidima lowered her head, the weight of betrayal crushing her heart, but her silence held more strength than words. Suddenly the door opened, and in walked a man carrying a leather briefcase. Everyone turned, startled by the unexpected entrance. The lawyer stepped forward, his expression firm, and greeted the room. He explained that he had urgent business with Chidima, business that could not wait another day. Ikin's smile faltered, and confusion spread across the faces of the guests. The lawyer opened the briefcase, pulled out freshly sealed documents, and laid them on the table in front of her. The room leaned closer, breaths held in suspense. Chidima wiped her tears, straightened her shoulders, and listened carefully as the lawyer read aloud. The documents confirmed that she was not only the rightful owner of the lake house, but also the sole controller of 3 other estates, each worth a fortune. Gasps filled the room as the truth unfolded. Ikin's face turned pale, his arrogance collapsing in seconds. Whispers quickly turned into stunned silence. Relatives who once sided with him now looked away, ashamed of their earlier words. Chidima lifted her chin, her voice steady at last, thanking the lawyer for making everything clear. She turned to her son, her eyes firm, showing him that no amount of disrespect could take away her dignity or her power. The Thanksgiving dinner that began with pain ended with justice, leaving Ikin speechless and the family in awe of her strength. Adama is struck by her son Samto at the dinner table. The sound of the blow silenced every voice around the table. Plates stopped clattering, cups hung in midair, and eyes widened in disbelief. She sat frozen in her chair, her cheek burning, while whispers rose among the relatives. Some shook their heads. Others leaned toward each other and murmured that she should just hand over the lake house and end the fight. Their words stung even more than the slap, for instead of defending her, they sided with the son who had humiliated her in front of everyone. Ayanda stayed quiet, her heart heavy, her dignity bruised, but she swallowed her tears and left the table without a word. Samto felt victorious. He strutted around like he had already claimed the property, bragging to cousins and uncles that the house would soon be his. He told them he would redesign it, rent it out, and make it even grander. The family encouraged him, saying he deserved it, and that his mother was being unreasonable. For days, the whispers in the community spread, painting Ayanda as a stubborn woman holding back progress. Samto basked in the attention, convinced he had broken her spirit. But Ayanda remained calm. She carried herself with quiet strength, keeping her plans hidden. She waited a full week, then sent out invitations, asking the same relatives and guests to gather at the lake house once again. The guests arrived with curiosity, some expecting to see her surrender, others eager to witness her shame. Samto arrived first, grinning widely, certain his mother was finally about to hand him the keys. When everyone settled, Ayanda stood before them, her face serene, her voice steady. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of those who had whispered against her, and then she dropped the news that shocked them all. She revealed that she had already sold the lake house. The gasps echoed through the hall, but she wasn't finished. With a calm smile, she added that she had purchased a far bigger mansion for herself, one more beautiful and grand than anything Samto had imagined. Samto's grin vanished instantly, replaced by disbelief. The family sat in silence, embarrassed for ever doubting her. Ayanda stood tall, reclaiming her dignity, proving that no amount of disrespect or greed could take away her power to choose her own future. That Ojeki's son Tabena slaps her at Thanksgiving. The gathering had been filled with laughter, the table heavy with food, and relatives chatting happily when the argument started. Tabena raised his voice, demanding that she hand over the lake house. Ojeki's refusal only fueled his anger, and before anyone could stop him, he struck her across the face. The sound cut through the air, and the room fell into a silence so heavy that even the clinking of cutlery stopped. Guests stared in disbelief, some gasped, others shook their heads, but no one dared to speak. Ojeki sat still, holding back tears, humiliated by the very child she had raised with love and sacrifice. What Tabena did not realize was that among the guests was a journalist invited by a family friend. The journalist had been quietly recording moments of the dinner, hoping to capture a warm holiday story, but instead caught the shocking scene on camera. Without drawing attention, he lowered his phone, knowing the truth had to be shown. Ojeki left the table quietly, her dignity crushed, while her son walked away believing he had won. Relatives whispered that she should have given in, but deep down they could not erase the image of the slap from their minds. In the following days, Ojeki stayed calm, speaking little, while Tabena bragged openly about how he had finally put his mother in her place. He laughed with friends, boasting about soon owning the property. But his confidence was short-lived. The journalist released the video online, and within hours it spread like wildfire. The shocking footage of a son striking his mother for greed stirred anger, sympathy, and outrage across the community and beyond. People who had once stayed silent now spoke out in her defense. Messages of support poured in, strangers praising her for her quiet strength, calling her a true mother who endured humiliation with dignity. Meanwhile, Tabena's name became a target of shame. Friends distanced themselves, neighbors glared, and the same relatives who once sided with him now avoided his presence. Ojeki, once humiliated, became a symbol of resilience. She walked through the community with her head high, admired for her patience and grace. Tabena, on the other hand, carried the weight of disgrace wherever he went, learning too late that greed and disrespect could destroy everything he thought he had gained. Oluchi is humiliated by her son Arin's in front of guests. It happened during a family dinner when laughter and chatter filled the air, and everyone was enjoying the celebration. Arin suddenly raised his voice, demanding that his mother give him the lake house immediately. When she calmly refused, his anger exploded. He insulted her, called her selfish, and treated her with no respect, right there in front of relatives and neighbors. The room fell quiet, and people exchanged uneasy glances, but no one stepped in to stop him. Oluchi's heart ached, but she did not shout back. She lowered her gaze, kept her tears inside, and said nothing. Her silence carried more weight than any words she could have spoken. Arins mistook her quietness for weakness. He walked around the room with arrogance, telling everyone that his mother would eventually hand him the keys to the lake house. Some relatives even whispered that she should surrender and let him take it, saying she was too old to manage it. Oluchi listened to every word, her heart heavy but her spirit unbroken. She left the gathering quietly, her mind already made up about what she would do. 2 days later, a surprise awaited everyone. Oluchi arrived at the lake house, but she was not alone. Tall security guards followed closely behind her, their presence strong and commanding. Neighbors and relatives who often treated the lake house like their own stood outside, expecting to enter as usual. Even Arins walked up proudly, thinking his mother had finally given in. But this time, Oluchi's silence turned into action. With a firm look, she ordered the guards to secure the gates and lock every door. People who once felt entitled to the property stood shocked as they were turned away. Arins shouted, demanding answers, but the guards blocked his path. For the first time he realized his mother's silence was not weakness, it was power. Oluchi stood tall, her dignity shining brighter than ever, watching the same guests who once pitied her now staring in disbelief. The lake house, once a place of arguments and greed, was now completely under her control. By locking everyone out, she proved that respect could not be demanded through force, and that no amount of humiliation could take away her authority. Arins stood outside, speechless, learning too late that his mother's quiet strength was far greater than his arrogance. Kamsi's son Ibuka slaps her, demanding her signature. The family had gathered around the dinner table, plates filled with food, voices rising with laughter, when the mood suddenly shifted. Ibuka's face twisted with anger as he pushed papers toward his mother, insisting she sign the lake house over to him. When she refused, his temper exploded, and he struck her across the face in front of everyone. The room went silent, forks dropped, mouths hung open, and guests stared in shock. Kamsi's hands trembled as she touched her cheek, her heart breaking at the thought that her own child could treat her with such cruelty. She said nothing, her tears falling quietly, while Ibuka stood tall, thinking he had finally broken her. Whispers filled the room, some siding with him, saying she should just give up the house, others too afraid to speak. Ibuka smirked, bragging that the property was already as good as his. Kamsi kept her head down, enduring the shame, her silence making her look powerless. But deep inside, she held a secret that no one at that table knew. She waited patiently, letting the evening pass, while her son gloated and the family murmured against her. After the meal, when everyone was still seated, Kamsi rose slowly. Her voice was calm but carried a firmness no one expected. She placed a folded envelope on the table and announced that it was her late husband's will. The room shifted instantly, eyes wide with curiosity, while Ibuka laughed, certain it would prove his right to the lake house. But when Kamsi opened the document and read the words aloud, the truth struck harder than any slap. The will revealed that Ibuka was never entitled to a single property. Every estate, every asset, every piece of wealth had been carefully outlined, and not one of them carried his name. Gasps filled the air, relatives leaned forward in disbelief, and Ibuka's confidence drained from his face. He stammered, unable to understand how the inheritance he had been so sure of had slipped from his grasp. Kamsi wiped her tears and lifted her chin, her strength shining through. She looked at her son, not with anger, but with the pain of a mother who had given everything and received betrayal in return. The family sat in stunned silence, ashamed for doubting her. Ibuka's pride crumbled, and Kamsi stood tall, proving that the truth, revealed at the right time, could restore dignity and silence arrogance. Nkem is insulted and slapped by her son Obiora. It happened during a family dinner when voices were high with chatter, and the table was filled with food. Obiora demanded the lake house, insisting that it should already belong to him. When Nkem refused, his anger flared, and he struck her in front of everyone. The sound of the slap silenced the room. Guests stared in shock, some whispering that she should not provoke him, others keeping their eyes down. Nkem held back her tears, the pain of betrayal deeper than the sting on her cheek. She stood quietly, her heart heavy, and left the table without a word. Obiora felt proud of himself, convinced he had finally broken her will. He told relatives that the house was already his and bragged about the plans he had for it. People nodded, agreeing that he deserved it, whispering that Nkem should step aside. She heard every word, but she kept her silence. Deep inside, she carried a plan that would leave everyone speechless. Days passed, and whispers grew louder in the community. Some believed Nkem had lost, while Obiora paraded himself as the rightful heir. But Nkem remained calm, her dignity hidden behind her quiet steps. Then she invited the family and guests to gather once more, this time at the very lake house that had caused the storm. Everyone arrived expecting a surrender. Obiora stood proudly at the front, smiling as if victory was already his. When all eyes turned to her, Nkem rose with strength in her voice. She announced that the lake house would never go to Obiora, nor to any relative. Gasps filled the air as she revealed that she had signed the property over to charity. The lake house, worth a fortune, would be transformed into a women's center where others could find shelter, hope, and empowerment. The crowd erupted in disbelief, jaws dropping, whispers filling the room. Obiora's pride collapsed. His face paled, his arrogance replaced by shock. Nkem stood tall, no longer the humiliated woman from before, but a symbol of courage and power. Her decision turned her pain into strength, showing everyone that respect and love mattered more than wealth. The slap meant to break her became the moment she rose higher, turning humiliation into lasting honor. That Igioma's son Chisholm slaps her before guests, calling her selfish. The sound echoed across the hall, and the crowd fell silent in shock. Plates and cups froze midair as whispers rippled around the room. Some covered their mouths in disbelief, while others shook their heads. Igioma's eyes filled with tears, but she said nothing. She lowered her head, swallowed her pain, and quietly left the gathering. Her silence was heavier than any words, and the humiliation burned deeply, especially because it came from the child she had raised with so much sacrifice. Chisholm, standing tall, boasted to those present that soon the lake house would belong to him. He laughed, saying his mother was clinging to wealth she didn't deserve. Some nodded along, eager to please him, while others avoided his eyes. For days afterward, he bragged across town, claiming that the lake house and everything around it was his birthright. He spoke as though Igioma was already powerless, and many believed him. Meanwhile, Igioma remained unseen, her quiet absence leaving room for his pride to grow. But beneath her silence, she was preparing. A week later, the road to the lake house filled with the sound of a powerful engine. Heads turned as a shining luxury car stopped at the gates. When the door opened, Igioma stepped out gracefully, dressed elegantly, her face calm but her presence commanding. 2 lawyers followed her, holding files and documents. The guests who had mocked her before gathered quickly, curious about the sudden display. Chisholm appeared, his arrogance still strong, but his smile faded when his mother began to speak. Igioma raised her voice with strength. She revealed not only her rights to the lake house, but also the shocking truth that she owned all the surrounding land. Every tree, every path, every piece of soil that bordered the water. The murmurs grew into gasps as the lawyers confirmed her claim with signed documents. The same people who had once mocked her now clapped, their voices rising in admiration. Chisholm's face dropped, his confidence shattered. The crowd turned away from him, their eyes filled with respect for Igioma. She had transformed humiliation into power, showing that dignity and patience were stronger than insults. What was meant to break her became the very moment she rose higher, reclaiming honor in front of all. Bustias. Thank you so much for watching to the end. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Bye.